Welcome to NP Certification Q&A, presented by Fitzgerald Health Education Associates. This podcast is for NP students studying to pass their NP certification exam. Getting to the correct test answers means breaking down the exam questions themselves. Expert Fitzgerald faculty clinicians share their knowledge and experience to help you dissect the anatomy of a test question so you can better understand how to arrive at the correct test answer. So, if you're ready, let's jump right in.
Piaget's sensorimotor stage of development is characterized by all of the following except object permanence, magical thinking, exploring, or manipulating the environment. What is the exception here? And you may be thinking, oh no, pediatrics and developmental stages. Yes, we do have to be prepared for that. Even if you don't plan to do child mental health or, practice in the specialty of pediatrics, our certification is across the lifespan, and you can be certain that there will be exam questions that assess your understanding of some of the basic theoretical constructs here. It really is important with respect to how you communicate with children. It's not so much all of the really difficult diagnoses and the complicated symptom complexes, but just how you talk with children, how they go through the various developmental stages, how they develop a moral center, how they develop cognition. It really does make a difference. If pediatrics is not your thing, it's really rather interesting, actually, how you have to step back and remember where they are in the stages of development. So you might recall that Jean Piaget was a child psychologist, and he is known for his articulation of the cognitive developmental stages. And he defines those stages as sensorimotor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operations. And that takes the child from birth through adolescence. So once they get to adolescence, for the most part, they are capable of adult thought, even if they don't actually exercise it. But before that, from birth to preschool and early school years and the school-age child, their cognitive development is really different, and we have to remain familiar with it if we can communicate with them appropriately. So it is an assessment question. It assesses your understanding of common characteristics of the sensorimotor stage of development. Even if you're not sure if you remember this very well, perhaps you can work your way through it. So it's a pretty straightforward question. All of the following are characteristic of the sensorimotor stage except. You are looking for the exception here. So when does the sensorimotor stage start? Even if you're not 100% sure, it just makes sense that this is the first stage of life, sensory motor, and the sensorimotor stage is the first 2 years. This occurs, according to Piaget, from ages 0 to 2 or birth to 2 years old, and it really is the time of sensory development and integration, and then the beginnings of developing those motor responses. And so, birth to 2 years old, just think about what a child is capable in the first 2 years of life. For the first year, they are typically not even ambulatory. The vast majority of their world is sensory. They're experiencing the world, they're taking in things and integrating it, which is why sensory development and sensory assessment is so critically important. It's why when they go to their primary care pediatric provider, it's so important that they be assessed for the ability to hear and see. Even the brandest new baby right out of the hospital, we test vision and we test hearing because their sensory input is so important to development in that first year of life. And then after the first year, they typically become ambulatory. They start to be able to walk. They master their fine motor skills very quickly, and they can start moving around their environment. They can start exploring. They can even start manipulating their immediate environment. What they're not capable of in the sensorimotor stage of development is magical thinking. So B is the correct answer to the question. The sensorimotor stage of development, like I said, it encompasses the first 2 years of life. The infant learns through sensory observation, gains motor control, and then begins to use that to explore and manipulate the environment. And object permanence is also established very early on. Object permanence, it is a psychological concept. object permanence really speaks to the infant's ability to develop the concept, to develop the trust that objects, and objects typically refer to people at the infant stage, that they are permanent in their world, even if they're out of sight, that the mother will be back even if she steps away. So object permanence develops very early on. Hopefully it develops very early on. An infant who has a disordered infancy and doesn't establish object permanence is really subject to relationship problems for the long haul. So object permanence is the other thing of this list that is developed during the sensory motor stage. But magical thinking, also known as phenomenalistic causality, if you want to be formal about it, is the notion that thinking bad thoughts can cause bad things to happen. And this occurs in the pre-operational thought. This occurs between the ages of 2 and 7. They start to have this concept of, if I think it, maybe it will happen. Or if they think a bad thought, or they think about just something happening and then it happens, they really believe that them thinking about it was the thing that made it happen. And that is not sensory motor. That comes in the next stage of development.
Thank you for listening to NP Certification Q&A, presented by Fitzgerald Health Education Associates. Please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. And for more NP resources, visit FHEA.com.